Hey YouTube, welcome back to Homegrown, where we review American-made outdoor gear. Please subscribe if you're interested in seeing more gear reviews from products made around the US. Today we're looking at a Muzzy Trocar HB broadhead. HB standing for hybrid broadhead. This one's been around for a few years and I've used it a fair bit, but got around to doing a review on it today. Historically, broadheads and bow hunters overall have sort of fallen into one of two camps. So you've got your fixed blade broadhead, which is just what it might indicate. The blades are affixed, they don't move or open. That is a slick trick, a standard slick trick, which is a cool broadhead in its own right. So the advantage of a fixed blade rather is reliability. There are no moving parts, so in theory nothing to go wrong. The downside would be that you do have a somewhat limited cutting diameter. Diameter of cut that the head can make, because since the blades are open or effectively fixed in flight, you can only make the broadhead so big before you start to have flight and accuracy issues, tuning issues. So that is sort of the fixed broadhead, and there are lots of folks who still use those, and that's great. I'm not really interested in the fight. But then the other option is a mechanical type head. So that is not the much debated Rage, although I am going to show you one of those in a minute. This is actually a head that Bass Pro Shops markets now, that I think is based off an old Rocky Mountain design, which was one of the first rear deploying mechanical broadheads. So by rear deploying, I mean just that you sort of see the shoulder here. So the shoulder on those blades as they enter the animal are going to open the head. So then you have a larger cutting diameter. So that would be the advantage to a mechanical head, that you can get a larger cutting diameter with better flight, because in flight the blades are going to stay shut. So in flight you've got a relatively small footprint there, so you typically aren't going to get tuning issues or accuracy issues with these mechanicals, because they are small in flight and then open up. The downside to that, which has been much argued by many people on the internet, is reliability. Well, do they open? Is there a possibility they could open in flight? Are they not going to open once they hit the animal? And then I've just effectively shot the thing with a field point. So lots of discussion about that stuff. Here's the Rage. I mean, this is the one that probably more people know about. The thing with the Rage and that Rocky Mountain, which I just don't think got the sort of hype that the Rage did, is that they're rear deploying. Initial mechanical heads were over the top heads, which I'm going to show you one of those in a minute. But the advantage to the Rage as well is that it is rear deploying. So that shoulder there is what's going to activate and release the blade down, and obviously that's going to happen on both sides as the head penetrates the target, and you get your big cutting diameter. The downside with Rages, this is one of the old designs, as you can see, that has an O-ring there. So that O-ring is what retains the blades in place in flight. So if those O-rings would sit in the same position for too long, they would sort of get indented potentially, or the O-ring would dry rot. Or look, I shot a lot of stuff with Rages over the years and never had any issues, but lots and lots of folks disagree with me, which is all well and good. But just sort of giving you the history of the market here. So then this is actually called a grave digger, and a lot of you may not have seen that. I think Carbon Express owns it now, which is part of Faradigm, which is the company that owns Muzzy as well. We actually had a friend of the family who was one of the original investors in this head. So it was a cool, one of the early hybrid designs. You can see it sort of has that Trocar style tip, but this one isn't over the top. So as opposed to a rear deploying head, the point is going to enter the target and the blades are going to deploy from the top down like that. Downside to that, there's some theories out there that the head can sort of cantilever as it's going in, or you could have some potential for the head not to open once it hits the target. Again, Dad and I both used this head for a handful of years, had great success with it. They flew great. Great penetration, got obviously big cutting diameter, and in four directions. That's the advantage of these hybrids. I didn't love that it was an over the top, particularly with an angled shot. You can imagine that as that thing's coming in there, you could catch on that blade and have something funny happen. So that was, in my mind, the thing I was always a little bit concerned about with the over the top hybrid. So I was really excited a few years ago when Muzzy released the HB, their hybrid broadhead, because it sort of seemed to address all the things that I had concerns about. There are no O-rings or collars or anything, and I recognize that Rage has models now that don't have those things either, but that's not what we're talking about today. So no collars or O-rings to potentially fail. You've effectively got friction that I'm guessing is set by that set screw there, and that's what holds the blades closed in flight. And then again, that rear deploying design. So that's what the head is going to look like as it penetrates the target. And you've got your fixed blades there. So if by some failure of physics the blades don't open, you've still got a 1-inch cutting diameter there with your fixed blade. So looking into the specifics on the Trocar HB, 100 grains, 0.035 blade thickness, and from what I can tell that applies both to the fixed blades and the expanding blades. 1-inch fixed, they are offset theoretically to induce spin, so I'll try to show you that here. So you're looking at the fixed blades here, and you can see that they are offset. They're not quite 180 degrees from each other, offset just a bit. Theory there being that the head will induce some spin, I guess, in flight. So the expanding heads open out to 1 5/8 inches. So you get 2 5/8 inch of cutting diameter in total between the two directions. Solid steel ferrule, that was the other thing that folks like to get fussy about with the Rage, is that it was made out of aluminum, but the ferrule is steel and appears to be one piece so far as I can tell. Retail on these is about $45. In the real world, you'll probably find them a little bit closer to 40. There's a crossbow version. There's also a titanium version that replaces that steel ferrule with a titanium ferrule if you want to spend a little bit more money and I guess potentially get something that's a bit stronger. Again, we've used these heads. I've shot them for a few years now, killed some stuff with them, haven't had any reliability. I mean, I think that ferrule is a good solid design. My experience overall, as I've said, I've shot all these heads. I mean, these are just out of the box in my bow case. So I've shot them all. I've had success with all of them. Shot placement is always the thing, whether you're hunting with a gun or you're hunting with a bow or you're hunting with a slingshot for that matter. Shot placement is the trick. To me, I like the hybrid head because it gives me some insurance. Sometimes things just don't go right. So you're a little bit off from where you'd like to be. That expanded wound channel to me is beneficial in that you get a little bit of insurance if something doesn't quite go right. I mean, Dad has shot piles and piles of deer with all these heads. I've got experience with deer on all of them and had good success with all of them. I have had a few deer either get away or just have a longer track job or have to let them lay longer. And look, it was all related to shot placement. But again, I think the mechanical head just gives me a little bit of insurance. Rage O-rings and collars have turned me off over the years. And I don't really like the over-the-top design. So to me, the Muzzy HB sort of checks all the boxes and solves all those problems for me. I mean, that is as close to the perfect broadhead for me as I've found. And as I said, I was excited when they released it, and I've been carrying it ever since. So the question that I sort of tease at in my in the title of this video is, are Muzzies still made in America? That was sort of a big part of their product claim for a long time. And if you Google, Muzzy made in the USA, you will get a pop-up. The first result that I got is a statement that says every Muzzy broadhead is proudly made in Cartersville, Georgia. Well, I can tell you right off the bat, that is not true anymore and has not been true for some time. That's an outdated website from a tour of the Muzzy facility. It was in Georgia for years and years, from what I understand, owned by the same family. But back in 2012, a company called Faradyne purchased Muzzy. So I'm going to probably hack this name. Masacha is the last name of the family that owned Muzzy for years and years. Michelle Masacha, whose married name is Eichler, she married Fred Eichler, for those of you who are familiar with the bow hunting business and the hunting TV business. She was the CEO at the time, and her quote was that my family is pleased to pass the reins to Faradyne's president and CEO, Rich Krause. So that sort of makes it sound like that they're out of the business altogether, which makes sense if they move the facility and production out of Georgia, which they have. I contacted Faradyne. Their reply to me, and I asked about Muzzy, Rage, and Glendale because they own them all. And they replied saying, Muzzy broadheads, Rage broadheads, and Glendale targets are all made at our warehouse in Superior, Washington. Superior, Wisconsin. I inquired about the materials origin on these products, asking, well, do the raw materials, the blades, the ferrules, the subcomponents, do they come from the U.S.? And I didn't get an answer. The agent came back and said that they were reaching out to product specialists in engineering, but I still didn't get an answer. I followed up, still didn't get an answer. So that's not necessarily indicative of an answer one way or another. But I think if she could have easily said, yes, it all comes from the U.S., they probably would have done that. So just sort of making a bit of an assumption there, but I did not get an answer as to the materials origin part of the story here. Faradyne, to give you a little more detail, they own Muzzy, Rage, Nocturnal Lighted Knox, which I also use, Glendale targets, Black targets, Carbon Express, who I actually think owns that Gravedigger design now, Eastman Outdoors, among some other brands. So Faradyne sure seems to have gobbled up a number of other companies here over the course of the last 8 or 10 years, and that is who owns Muzzy now. So my final thoughts on the Trocar HB. Still made in the U.S., at least still assembled in the U.S. for sure, in Wisconsin, although they curiously seem not to promote that as much these days. Great design to me, good reliability, rear deploying, you've got your fixed heads there. I think it's just a great design all around, particularly for deer size game. You get into big stuff, at that point, there's certainly an argument to be made as to whether or not any mechanical is the right solution, but I'll leave that for another day. And no O-rings or collars to go bad. The cons, and this does irritate me pretty badly, they don't make a practice head for this thing. So this is the head that you're going to fling at your practice target. Granted, I've not had any flight issues, but I'm at least going to check any broadhead that I'm going to shoot and make sure that it's grouping with my field points, which means I'm going to dull the blades and chew up my target and, go through the hassle of pulling one of these things back out with the blades opened. So I am fairly annoyed about that. I'd pay extra for a practice head if they wanted to sell them separately so far as that goes. So that's the one con, the one major con to me. The upside of that is that they do sell replacement blades. So I suppose if you pick one to be your practice head, you're not likely to damage that steel ferrule. You could replace the blades and be back in business. But man, I'd sure like for them to put a practice head out there. So hopefully this review was helpful. If you'd like more gear reviews on American-made outdoor products, please subscribe. Thanks. We'll see you next time.